Okay. Hey, Becca, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Doing well, thanks. So I was surprised, happy to see the announcement and no registration, just clicking. There you go.
Yeah, I had a registration link in a newsletter a couple weeks ago, but
Yeah.
I figured this is easier. If we're not charging anything, we don't really need information from people. So
Yeah. Well, it's a nice reminder this morning too. So
yeah, I'm expecting about 4 other people, and here's one now. You must be. Is it Jimmy? I'm not sure he can hear me yet. I think your microphone's muted, Jimmy. Might be in the lower left of the screen. Hopefully you can hear me. There you go.
I can hear you now.
Great. It is Jimmy, is that right?
Yes, it is.
Great. And you're with Christian Appalachian Project in Kentucky?
I am. Yep.
Great. And Jim is also in Kentucky.
I see that.
I don't see his face, but his voice is on. He's with Kentucky Emergency Management.
Okay. Cool.
yeah, you may see my face in a little bit. I forget. All right. Sorry, we have to wait to see who else is on the video portion before I can unscreen myself.
Oh, okay. That's fine. I'm expecting at least 3 other people have told me they'll make it, so might be one of them now. Let's see. Hi, who just joined by phone?
I'm Kathleen McWilliams with Housing Assistance Corporation, Hendersonville, North Carolina.
Great. Welcome, Kathleen.
Thank you.
This is Becca with Reframe, and I've got Jimmy with CAP, Christian Appalachian Project in Kentucky, and also Jim Garrett with Kentucky Emergency Management. And let's see, is Kathleen, is Stephanie joining from your office? Do you know?
I'm not sure. I'm upstairs
Okay.
in our office, and she's downstairs.
Okay, she's at.
And I haven't had a chance.
I thought she might.
I haven't had a chance to talk to her.
Okay.
In regards to this.
I think she's going to join too. I didn't know if you were a substitute for. Oh, it looks like she's here now. Great.
Okay, good.
Hi, Stephanie. We're just waiting on, I think, 2 more people. Just wait another minute or 2 and we'll get started. Jimmy, I'm expecting somebody else from CAP also.
Yep.
Jenny?
Yes. I actually texted her. She's also in another location, so I don't know for sure, but I saw her name on there, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. And then I'm also expecting one last person out in Kansas. Kevin is with Hope Builders. We'll see if he joins. Just another minute and we'll get started then. So how are you all doing today?
Doing fine. Can you hear me?
Doing good.
Yes, I can.
Great.
Yeah, it sounds like somebody has a little bit of background noise. I don't know if it's cars going by or a fan or some kind of white noise. Does anybody have a waterfall in their office? I'm not sure what that is.
I'm not hearing what you're hearing.
Okay, does anybody else hear the white noise?
Yeah.
So I wonder if it's
I do.
okay. It might be you then, Stephanie. In the lower left of the screen, there should be a mute button. You want to try that for a second?
Yeah.
Yep, it's you. So maybe if you want to unmute yourself when you want to talk, and then if you're not talking, if you don't mind, that would be great. All right. Well, I have that it's 5 after, so we'll go ahead and get started, and hopefully the others will join when they can. But I think you all know me, or at least could guess who I am. But I'm Becca Davis. I'm the executive director of Reframe Association, and I appreciate you all joining me for this hour. We're going to talk about volunteers and how to support them and appreciate them and what to do about those difficult volunteers. And just a little bit about my background for those who don't know me well. I used to work for Appalachia Service Project, and so I'll be sharing some examples and anecdotes from my time with ASP. I'm here in Johnson City, Tennessee. And let's see, Jimmy, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. What are we?
Maybe job title, organization, and I guess if you guys don't mind mentioning like how many volunteers you work with, and maybe whether they're local or if they come from a distance, how long they serve with you, just a short intro about your volunteer base.
Sure. Yeah, so my name is Jimmy Owsley, and as Becca said, I work with Christian Appalachian Project in our Sandy Valley region, which is the far eastern region of Kentucky. So I have right now 13 volunteers, long-term volunteers. We get groups, church groups, and that kind of stuff that come in, colleges. But in terms of on a daily basis, 13 long-term volunteers in 2 counties, Johnson and Floyd. They generally come from not from this area. Every once in a while we get a local volunteer, but they're generally from all different locations across the United States and of all different age ranges. Probably 2/3 to 3/4 of them work in housing.
Okay, great, thanks. Let's see, Kathleen, do you mind introducing yourself?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I am the Resource Development Director at Housing Assistance Corporation. Stephanie and I work very closely together, and I saw the topic for today's webinar and thought that I would like to join all of you and hear what's going on. And I also will be registering for the conference that is coming up in November.
Great. We're excited to have you all join us. Stephanie, do you want to add anything? Maybe tell us a little bit about your volunteers.
Okay, we have several groups that volunteer with us on a recurring basis. We have one church that has 4 teams that volunteer with us, and they rotate throughout the year, so they volunteer twice a month. We also have a ramp team that does nothing but build ramps. They've been doing this for over 20 years, I guess, and there's probably about 10 of those guys, and they're kind of like a little club. Go out and build 1 ramp a month, and sometimes 2. And we have Camp Toccoa, which is a summer camp that sends their high school students out on Fridays during the summer for a service opportunity. We have some individual volunteers that volunteer just on a occasional basis with our home repair coordinator, but mostly it's with groups.
Okay, great, thanks. Jim, you're up. I think you've muted yourself, so don't forget to unmute. Okay.
Got it. So I'm the volunteer services coordinator for Kentucky Emergency Management, which may sound a little unusual since you're more involved in direct volunteer service or I guess directing volunteers. Although I've done plenty of that through my professional career, what I do now is organize groups, volunteer groups from faith-based or nonprofit groups that want to provide assistance before, during, or after disasters. And many of those groups will come, they're the mission service groups that come to rebuild homes after disasters. So I kind of see that local communities are gearing up and able to work them well and receive them well when people want to follow their hearts and help after disaster.
Great, thanks. Glad you joined us. So the first thing I was thinking about as I prepared for this was, my experience with Appalachia Service Project. I started as a volunteer high school youth and then was on summer staff and later on full-time staff. And ASP went through a bit of a transition during those years about how they view volunteers, and I feel like it made a big difference in how they support and appreciate their volunteers. So I thought I'd just share about that briefly, and then you all can comment and share your own stories about how you support and appreciate. When I was a high school volunteer back in the late 90s, ASP was very, very focused on the homeowner and the repairs, and they still are, but volunteers were really seen as the means to the end. We were the way to get the work done. And so as a young college student, the one coordinating the volunteers, often I'd get frustrated and see the volunteers as sort of being in the way or not doing what I wanted. And since then, ASP's made an intentional shift to see volunteers as an equally important part of their mission. That the volunteer experience is really important, and the experience they have affects not only how they serve the homeowners, but what they do when they return back home and how involved they get in their own communities and churches, and just how they end up living a service-filled life or not, especially young, impressionable youth. And so ASP's made a lot of changes over the years to have that culture shift, which doesn't happen quickly or easily. But I feel like they're in a place now where they really see themselves as having a dual mission of both repairing homes and providing services to families, and also providing life-changing experiences for volunteers. And so I'm guessing all of you see volunteers as important because you're on this webinar. But I was wondering, how your organization sees sort of that duality in the, in your mission. Is your mission towards volunteers or the homeowners, or do you see it as equal parts like that? And how does that affect what sort of support or encouragement you give? If you want to be more specific and offer concrete examples of things you do to appreciate your volunteers or support them, that would be great too. Mm-hmm. And hi, Jenny, you must be Jimmy's colleague with CAP. Welcome.
Yeah. Sorry, I was at another meeting. So
oh, that's no problem. Great, we were just chit-chatting and introducing ourselves, and we're just getting started. So does anybody else mind sharing, I guess, the sort of philosophy of your organization, how you view volunteers and how that affects how you work with them?
Yeah, I'll go. We see volunteers as part of our mission in terms of outreach. We do try to work with local groups, but we also work with groups from far away. And our mission is affordable housing, so we want people to carry that service with them back, like you say, into their homes, into their schools, into their churches, and looking at getting the word out about how big the problems are that we're facing and different ways that we can address them. The more people that we have that are more aware of what the situations are like, the more creative brains we can bring to the table. So that's how we look at our volunteers, and we do a lot of different kinds of volunteer recognition depending on what the individuals or the groups want. some groups want us to bring popsicles when it's hot in the afternoon, and some groups want their picture in the paper, and some, want a meal together. So there's lots of different ways that we can address that.
Great.
Mhm. So I guess I can chime in. I see somebody else on the screen though with the phone call. I'm not sure if they're talking or not.
I don't think so. I think that's Kathleen. I think she
Okay.
has. I think she's called in and is on the computer. So I think.
Gotcha. Okay.
I am.
Okay.
Okay.
I think we have, because we have different programs that volunteers serve in, and I think each manager in those programs can set a different tone for how they view volunteers. So I think we have a wide range, some that are really investing in their volunteers and where those volunteers are going, and some that maybe, kind of like you said, Becca, that maybe see them as a means to an end, or as a problem sometimes when they're, in the way or whatever, but that they're there for a purpose to serve certain people. So I think part of our goal as the volunteer program, that's the program that Jenny and I work in, which is separated from those other programs, is to encourage that. We were recently having a discussion about volunteer appreciation, probably last month, not very long ago. And it was really an interesting discussion as to whether that's something that we should be doing as the people who are the volunteer life managers or the ones in admissions and that kind of stuff, or is it something that the programs who actually work with these volunteers on a daily basis should be doing? And so we kind of determined that it's our role to encourage those programs to show their appreciation for volunteers and to be active in that, but that's the proper way that it should go, and the way that it would mean the most for those volunteers would be coming through those managers and employees that they're working with on a daily basis.
Mhm. Okay. Jenny, do you want to add anything? Do you know about some specific ways that CAP does volunteer appreciation? Whoops, I think we just lost her.
Uh-oh. Yeah, she just texted me. I think, let's see.
Must have scared her. Tough
Yeah,
time.
she said their internet went down. She said
Oh no.
nothing. Oh, I think nothing new meant the internet.
Okay.
But so in the past, we did do a dinner, like a volunteer appreciation dinner, where we would serve them dinner and have it be a really nice meal. We've done things like pizza and that kind of stuff. And then again, the tension there is you have some volunteers who really enjoy that recognition and having something given to them in that way. And then there's others who say, well, why didn't we spend this on some of the people we serve, some of our participants or that kind of thing. So I think we've tried different avenues, but haven't necessarily settled on one going forward.
There's something I'd like to share that we like to do is to take pictures of individuals when they're volunteering, give them a thank you card with their picture in it. And it doesn't cost a lot, but for those people who are more are less inclined for the public stuff,
Yep.
that seems to be good for them.
Yeah, definitely. And we do send out cards. We did that this year. I guess there's a volunteer appreciation week. We sent out handwritten notes to each of them, which hopefully that was a good thing. I think a handwritten note is always a good thing. I'm interested in the picture thing. What's behind the picture?
Well, our volunteers are usually working in home repair. So those action shots where they're wielding a saw or hammering or something, or having a good time with their other volunteers.
Yeah.
Those are the kind of things I try to capture. Also, sometimes a group will come in and not actually get to see the finished.
Right.
Like they might be working on part of the project, but they don't get to see the finish. So that's another way to enforce that.
That is cool.
Yeah, I think anything you can do to personalize it really makes a difference. I know when I was on summer staff for ASP, we had groups of about 70 or 80 coming through every week. And one of the things I tried to do was just to make sure I knew everybody's name. On the very first day, I would memorize all the adults' names. And my goal is by the end of the week to Friday night dinner, be able to serve dinner and to name each youth by name. And it gets harder and harder as the weeks go on and there's more names. But it means a lot to people if you take the time to get to know them individually. And I enjoyed just talking about things not related to the home repair work and trying to find out, what people do back home, what their jobs are, what community activities they're involved in. And sometimes that pays off. You may find out that somebody who's been volunteering for a long time is actually, works for a bigger company that has a matching donations program or, that wasn't my reason for connecting with people. I found that in the long run, it really did pay off to know some personal details about them. And then depending if, how often they come back, if you can have a way to remember that information or jot it down in a database, or if you can remind yourself before you see them the next time, I think that will go even further. A lot of, I guess, relates to donor management too. If you're dealing with donors, they like the same sorts of things, but I think anytime it can be more personal with volunteers.
Mm-hmm.
It's nice. I know ASP does some plaques for groups that have volunteered for a long length of time. Maybe it's their 20th anniversary of service or something like that, and they'll make a little plaque. It's not very expensive, and it'll either be presented during their volunteer week, or ASP CEO does quite a bit of traveling for work related to securing donations, so he might present it in person at the church or during their church service or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, I had a couple other ideas. I went back, we have a best practice award in the fall that we give for volunteer hospitality. And this past year, there was one given to Raise the Roof Project down in Alabama. And theirs was about handwritten thank you notes. So Jimmy, get on that. They have all volunteer staff. They actually have no paid staff members. And they still write handwritten thank yous to every one of their volunteers, which is a really big undertaking. Also, there was Ozark Mission Project. They have something that was sort of interesting. So their groups come in for a week at a time, and they created what they call Driver's Den, which is a special space just for the adults to go and hang out. They had snacks. They had a staff person there who could answer questions. It was a way to get away from all the crazy high school youth for a little while and just retreat and enjoy the experience. So just to appreciate the adult leaders. And let's see, the year before, I think the award winner was Rippling Hope, and theirs was a lot about the personalization, about getting to know the individuals, kind of what I was already talking about with that. Anyway, you all can be thinking you can nominate yourselves later this summer. If you think you've got a really good practice, you could win some reframe bucks and some publicity for your organization. Let's see. Other ideas, things you guys do to appreciate volunteers?
I'm not sure what Jimmy already mentioned, but did you talk about retreats and things like that, Jimmy?
No, that would be great.
Mostly
Yes.
talking about volunteer appreciation, what the conversations we had just recently had about him.
Gotcha. I'm sorry that our internet went down for a few minutes. But we, I know our program is different than a few of yours, but most of our volunteers are here for a year. So we do try to make sure we give them 2 retreats a year. Actually ends up being a little bit more than that, but we do 2 longer retreats in the fall and spring. And I know our programs do a great job of, having celebratory lunches and exit lunches and things like that, kind of based on what they can do. So.
Cool. Sounds good.
Yeah.
May I ask a question with that? When you're talking about the year-long volunteers, I know some of our programs certainly would have staff like that come in, but Christian Appalachian Project uses a lot of what used to be called episodic volunteers. You know, the people that do come in on the mission trips or the alternative spring breaks, your work camps and things like that. Do you do anything to try to recognize those volunteers who may be shorter term than the staff supplemental volunteers?
Sure. That's a great question. Jimmy, we do, maybe not, we do that afterwards. We always send a handwritten thank you notes for all of our short-term volunteers, which are typically, like you said, 1 week to 3 weeks for our alternative spring break programs. I don't know Jimmy, is there anything else you can think of that we do?
I was wondering if there's anything we do with groups after groups come and leave, but I
Yeah.
don't actually know the answer to that. I like the idea. I don't think you were on when somebody mentioned the idea of celebrating anniversaries of service. So like we've got a group that comes to Youth Fest that's been coming for 9 years. So it'd be awesome to say, give them something like they mentioned a plaque or something like that on a
That's a good idea.
significant anniversary. I thought that was cool.
When I was at ASP, I found that what volunteers most appreciated was not the little tokens and thank yous, but was just the support that they got as a volunteer and being valued in that moment. And so when I was talking about the kind of culture shift that ASP had from seeing volunteers as a means to the end to being important in and of themselves, most of those changes weren't about appreciation, but it was more about how the volunteer was treated during their time of service. So did a lot of training for our staff and flexibility and listening to volunteers, hearing their advice, figuring out how to try new ideas that volunteers offer instead of shooting them down or saying, you know, we only do things this one particular way. And just making it easy to volunteer with ASP or whatever the organization is. So things like improving the food. Certainly nobody comes on a mission trip to eat great food, but it doesn't hurt if, you know, you don't want them to be complaining about the poor quality of food or that they're hungry because there's not enough food. The same thing, you know, it doesn't have to be a super cushy place to stay or to shower, but, you know, if you have worked really hard, it's really nice to have a warm shower at the end of the day and not a freezing cold shower. And so ASP used to use a lot of more sketchy, I guess, temporary volunteer locations that had less exciting accommodations, and so they worked on improving that. Basically to eliminate distractions was the goal. If you can eliminate all those other things that can make a volunteer not have a good experience, then they'll be able to focus more on why they're there and what they're doing to serve. You know, it doesn't have to be a 5-star hotel, but as long as their basic needs are met and taken care of, it, you know, goes a long way, I think. Are there things that you all do to support volunteers either before their trip to make it easier on them, or what kinds of support systems do you have in place during the trip that helps them have an enjoyable experience?
We do an orientation with a group manual that gives them a lot of information before they get there about the area, and also gives them devotional guides for their week. Y'all may do that as well. And then, I mean, our facilities are pretty nice, so I think we do well there. I think, but.
See. It looks like Kevin just joined us. Kevin's with Hope Builders out in Kansas. Welcome. We're just talking about ways that we can support our volunteers while they're serving with us. Can you hear us okay, Kevin? He might be able to hear us and not have his microphone on. Let's see, Stephanie or Kathleen, do you want to talk about what kind of support systems you have in place for your volunteers, either beforehand to prepare them or during their service experience?
Sure. Beforehand, we don't do a whole lot. Once they arrive on site, we do an orientation, and we have information, especially for the leaders, about our where the local facilities are, different things they might want to do when they are finished with their day, if they want to do some recreation or whatever. We don't provide lodging, and we don't usually provide food. That's usually the groups themselves. But we have all the extras. So if it's an adult group, especially, we have coffee. We make sure we have coffee for them on site, and we provide a staff person, which is me, to be available to them all day to run and go get extra whatever, or to answer questions, or tell them what's in their supply bag, first aid kit supply bag for their staff support. That's basically it.
Great. Yeah, I would guess that it's those sorts of things that make the difference into whether a group returns again and again. And, the plaques and thank you notes and all are important too, but I would say probably the biggest thing for volunteers in retention is just making sure that their experience is a really good one. And then if it is, then they're going to be more likely to go tell other people about it, which will be some, word of mouth recruitment too for more volunteers. Yeah.
May I ask, Stephanie, with not providing housing or meals, do you spend some time with the groups to help them identify good housing locations and things? I mean, that's a good practice of hospitality, I would think.
Yes, we do have a resource guide for them. I forgot about that. Thanks for bringing that up. A list of local places to stay that other groups have recommended when they've come to work for us. Churches that they may want to connect with while they're here, and that sort of thing. So sort of a community resource guide. We do send that out ahead of time so that they can help plan their trip. It's just not something that we're able to offer on our own, but we can make those connections for them. Also, helping them find the work that's appropriate for their group and their skill level, and connecting them with other agencies. If we don't have enough appropriate work for the whole week, we can network with our other friend agencies to find other things that they can do. For example, we had a college group that came in December, and we only had about 3 days worth of construction for them, but we found through a couple of other agencies other opportunities for them to serve while they were here, so they could get a well-rounded experience and enjoy their time. They appreciated that.
So, Stephanie, I was thinking, this is Kathleen, I was thinking maybe you might want to say a few words about Bike and Build, because we have provided resources for them, even though we don't have the housing ourselves. We had community partners that stepped up and said that they would house them, and we even had one pastor, he made meals for them, which was really great. And we always try to give them information about the downtown area, because it's so close usually to the proximity of where they're staying, that they can really become a part of Hendersonville, which is a very unique, wonderful, downtown, charming place to walk around and greet other people. And we have a very welcoming community. So that to me is a real plus when they come here.
Yeah, we do facilitate those relationships for them. So we introduce them to the people that they need to know. We don't actually provide it from our budget and from our staff, but we introduce them to people that they can ask.
Great. I liked what you said too, Stephanie, about matching the skill level of the volunteer with their project. I think that's so important with home repair projects. Probably the worst experience a volunteer group could have would be being assigned a project that's way over their heads and not having the support that they need to get it done, just feeling scared or unsafe, or like they're not able to accomplish anything. But on the other hand, if you have a really skilled worker, a skilled tradesperson, and you assign them to a really simple painting project and not using their skills, that can be equally as frustrating. So it can be really hard to match everything up, especially if you have short-term volunteers that are changing pretty frequently, to keep projects moving forward with the right skill level of volunteers and the right numbers of volunteers, and ending all the projects on time before you don't have any more volunteers. it's a really tough balancing act. But I think that makes a big difference for volunteers if they feel like their skills are being used and they're comfortable with what they're being asked to do, or have the support if it's a more difficult project. Kevin,
Stephanie,
go ahead.
Stephanie, another thing I was thinking about as Becca was talking was, I don't know, have you ever mentioned to this group our Women for the Win program, and how that combines not only what you were saying, Becca, about the skill level, but improving the skill level through teaching and training, and then actually doing real projects right there on the spot that are part of our home repair program. And it's not that we're trying to exclude males from being a part of it, but we do know that women sometimes are not so comfortable with all those tools and projects of repair and things like that. And this is one way in which we can really find women in our community that are interested in this, and they're part of this program. Although one of our trainers is a male, but his wife is there too, also instructing us.
Great. Kevin, I'm glad you joined us. I'm hoping you have a microphone so you could share with us. Can you talk a little bit about your volunteers? Maybe just first of all about how many you have and what sorts of things they do, if they're local volunteers. I think they are. How often they serve with you, that kind of thing, and then what you guys do to support and appreciate them.
Well, we've been in, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. We've been around since 2000, and our volunteer or our work days are on Saturdays. And in the warmer months, we do it 2 Saturdays a month, the second and the fourth. And we have a volunteer list of about 120. But we have a core group of volunteers, about 25, that volunteer on a very consistent basis. And our biggest fear is that we need to know the Tuesday night before the project how many people are going to show up, so that we can get the funds available for purchasing the materials and then getting everything lined up so that when the volunteers show up at the work site on Saturday, everything is ready to go. And it doesn't always work as easy as it sounds. Our biggest fear is that we have 7 people show up, sign up, and 20 show up. And when we're building a wheelchair ramp, probably 15 is about the most that we can handle at the project, where everybody is semi-engaged. When you get 20, you have a bunch of people standing around, and when that happens, we know that those volunteers will probably never volunteer with us again. So we try to keep a project in our back pocket where some skilled people show up, and say it's building a staircase or a railing. We'll be able to take those 2 to 3 and send them off onto another project. But we usually have to go purchase the building materials and everything at that particular time. Mm-hmm. We've been finding that it used to be almost all males that were the volunteers, and right now we probably have between 3 and 5 females that volunteer on a fairly regular basis. And some are volunteering to increase their skill sets, and others are volunteering because they just wanted to know what it was about. And then they usually get hooked. We also find that the females are much more likely to sign up when they're supposed to sign up, whereas the guys and the engineers are the worst ones. They wake up Saturday morning and I go, well, I'll do Hope Builder, and we have 10 guys that we don't know what to do with at that particular point in time. We used to have a hard time getting volunteers, and now it's trying to match the volunteers to the projects and try to find projects that are challenging for the volunteers. Last year we built over 30 wheelchair ramps, and we're approaching about 150 that we've built, probably most of them probably since 2010. But we have major bath remodels, which kind of don't fit into our the skill sets that we have, and then a bath remodel, most that you can get involved in that is 2 or 3 people. And the biggest problem is most of the houses that we would be working on only have 1 bathroom. So the project's got to be done and completed in 1 day, which really creates a big problem. We have done somewhere, we did a total bath remodel, and that was a 3-day project. And I've never seen those volunteers again. Because they were working 16-hour days, and that, so we kind of learned not to overload the skilled volunteers, or we won't see them again. And then every once in a while, we get contacted by church groups where they're coming into the Kansas City area, and there's about 25 to 50 people, and they want projects to keep their youth busy for a week's time. We have lined up painting projects, but most of our volunteers, you may mention paint, they won't show up. So we kind of park those off to the side, and then when we get a group of people that want to be engaged, then we'll do the painting projects.
Cool. Thanks for sharing. It looks like we had somebody else join us. Veronica, I think her microphone's on mute. I'm guessing it's Veronica with Good Neighbors, also in Kentucky. Veronica, if you don't mind unmuting yourself for a minute, and if you want to just introduce yourself real quick, if you can. In the lower left corner of the screen, the mute button. Maybe she doesn't have a microphone. Well, we're glad you're here anyway, even if you're only listening. That's okay. Let's see. Oh, it's Veronica from SSP. She read Sierra Service Project. There we go. She's out on the West Coast. No microphone. That's okay. If you do want to talk, Veronica, you can call in. Also, I think there was a phone number, an email for that, or I can send it to you if you want. But you're welcome just to listen to. Let's see. Well, the other thing I wanted to talk about related to volunteers is, what do you do when things don't go well? What do you do with those difficult volunteers? And they're supposed to be there to help you, but they're making things harder than they're supposed to be. Do you fire them? Do you let them do what they want? I guess the most common conflicts that I recall from when I was working at ASP had to do with either rules and the volunteers not wanting to follow rules, whether it's the dress code, or for volunteers that stayed overnight, wanting to stay up too late, or I have a million stories about crazy things volunteers have done, including going to an adjoining farm and cow tipping, literally tipping or attempting to tip over cows in the middle of the night. That was a fun one to de-escalate with the police when they showed up. And then also I recall a lot of construction disagreements where especially a skilled volunteer wants to do things in a certain way that's different than what the organization's used to doing. We've even already bought the materials for one way, but they want to do it a different way. And ASP's model has a lot of college students for summer staff that are overseeing the projects. So they're young people with very little construction experience, and then in come these experienced contractors who know everything, of course. And so there's a bit of an age conflict there with, some of the older adults with experience not wanting to listen to the young adults who are supposed to be in charge but maybe don't have the same level of experience. So I'm sure none of you have any sorts of problems with your volunteers like this, but if you did happen to, what do you guys do? How do you de-escalate things? And do you provide any training for your staff on that? What do you normally do with difficult situations with volunteers? So you all have perfect volunteers? I want to come work for you all.
We've experienced some of those things, but I can't tell you what to do about it. I want to learn. I want to learn what to do about it.
Does anybody have tips for what you do when the volunteers don't want to do what you want them to do?
We've had a couple cases where the volunteer was extremely disruptive, wanted to do it their way, and just didn't play well with other people. And we usually select a board member and ask the board member to go fire that person and ask them to leave the site. And then somebody will contact that individual later on, just to follow up with them. But 17 years, it hasn't happened that often.
Hmm. I had some training when I was at ASP in a particular model of conflict management. They called it influencing options. And the idea was that anytime there's a conflict, you always have options. You can either accept what the other person wants and just let them do it, which I think ASP's tried some with volunteers. If it's not going to cost more, and if it really is somebody with skills, it's not going to take too much longer to let them try whatever they want. So that would be the accept option. The next option they had is influence. You got to try to convince them to come over to your side with non-threatening language, lots of I statements and things like that. And if that doesn't work, if you can't accept whatever they want and it's not working to influence them, then your third option is removal, which would be that firing thing. And it could be firing the volunteer altogether and sending them home if it's a really serious infraction, or assigning them to a different project where they can agree with you on construction if that's what the issue is. It's really simple, and I guess it's common sense when you think about it, but it helps me in the moment to realize I had these three very specific options and to think through them and how I wanted to handle the situation. I think sometimes when you're in a conflict like that, it can just be overwhelming to know even where to start. So that gave me some language to help think about it. That was helpful. And let's see, Veronica, did you call in? I see a 916 number. I'm guessing that's you on the phone.
I did call in.
Awesome. Great.
Thanks, Becca.
Yeah. What do you guys out at Sierra Service Project do with your difficult volunteers? Do you have any tips or tricks?
Yeah, well, similarly, we haven't really had a huge volume of difficult people. When you're working with church people, pretty much if you've come together for that week, it's pretty easy to say, yeah, this is the reason we're all here. One thing we do is in the beginning, we're actually in the middle of training our first-time adult counselors. So that looks like having them go through about an hour of online training, and in which we discuss, these are the expectations that we have for you. These are the expectations of how you should interact with the youth and how you should engage with the type of work project. The whole variety of everything from don't do it for them to encourage people to participate and all of that. Last year we had an issue with an adult who had different theological perspective on an activity we called Love Feast. It's a sort of variation on communion. And in that situation, she was rather aggressive and was rather bullying our site director. And in that situation, we had our executive director talk to her. But other than that, I mean, it's just been going through training for our staff, 10-day training before the summer, and teaching them conflict resolution and how to, just what you were saying before, how to either engage with or redirect a problem.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah, I think setting expectations up front can go a long way in helping to eliminate the possibility of conflicts from happening to begin with. If people understand what you're looking for and they come in with those expectations. Sometimes you can even just point back to those expectations if things don't pan out the way you wanted them to remind them that they, agreed to this particular experience. And I know ASP has some sort of covenant or contract that their volunteers sign, and even pulling that out and pointing to the specific language of, you agreed that you do this and this and this, and you're not. Sometimes pointing out that discrepancy helps open people's eyes and realize, like, gosh, yeah, I am being unreasonable and I need to change my attitude. I'm here to serve. So hopefully.
Becca, if I could do a little bit of follow-up question for that. As I process the whole idea of an aggressive bully at a love feast, I think that's a fascinating image for me. But I was wondering that too. Some of what you were just describing, though, you said, well, here are things you agreed to. I wonder if we can appeal to an organization's mission, if we know what that is, what their mission statement is, to say, well, let's have a conversation to see what it is you want to accomplish and how this behavior is fulfilling your mission. I would guess that maybe if we have those kinds of conversations, we may find that it's not mission fulfilling, a bad behavior. And maybe that can help in that conversation of redirection. I mean, does anybody have experience with that, of talking to a group about their own mission and identity in that mission and how it may not be fulfilled in certain activities?
I mean, I think it does help to put a conflict in the context of the big picture. It's not usually about the exact way the project needs to be done. And so if we can help open people's eyes up to, what they're really there for, I think it makes a difference. I can't think of a specific example, but I know one of the influencing options that was offered in this training I went through was about kind of pointing out the discrepancies to someone, saying, I'm confused because you said you wanted to come here and serve families and, help, make homes warmer, safer, drier, but you're refusing to do it the way that our organization has asked you to. So help me understand why, and I guess just pointing it, like you said, back to the mission, Jim. And sometimes that'll help people back down. Yeah, I mean, hopefully they're minor conflicts that can be resolved fairly easily. I know there have been some ASP volunteers who've been shipped home at their parents' expense if there's a youth who does something really crazy, and as youth sometimes do. But hopefully it's a minor issue that doesn't take up a lot of our energies.
Well, let me ask. I'm going to jump in there and ask about that, because we may have some experiences. Sometimes the groups are self-monitoring, though, too. So Are you saying this is times when ASP had to do something, or did the group actually get on top of it first? And, I've seen that happen plenty of times where the group says, you've done a violation, we're sending you home.
I've seen it both ways. It works much better when the group leaders are in agreement, or maybe if they make the decision that, one of their youth is out of control and, has done something beyond reparation, whatever, for that week. There have been a couple times, I think, where ASPs insisted that somebody go home, maybe against what the group leader wished, because they didn't like to put somebody on a bus back to Minnesota or wherever they came from. And those are very rare, and that would be much more of a serious offense. I'm thinking of, I'm trying to think of a specific example. It's been a few years, but I don't know if a youth was caught stealing from a local store or from a homeowner, or something pretty serious like that. or sneaking out and, not showing up at bedtime, disappearing, that kind of thing, where their safety's in danger or where they're putting the reputation of the organization at risk. I think those are the sorts of things where ASP has effectively fired the youth volunteer.
Yeah, now let me stay with that for a moment for all of us with our groups and organizations too, because I think that's where, when you have a year-round program, you're established, so I think of where your offices are. I mean, that's one thing. You've got those ongoing relationships with those vendors, the local stores, the local people. So, yeah, that's where groups need to understand sometimes if a group member does something, wrong, you have an ongoing relationship you've got to protect. And you say, well, I don't want local store owners to think that we let it go, that somebody has shoplifted from them. We they have to see that direct action. So I wonder if that's something, again, where group leaders have to come along and be in agreement with that, to say, no, this is about our relationship with you all go home, but I need to see that home, that shop owner next week. So I'm protecting that relationship, and we're done. I don't know. I mean, is that something of concern to groups with, if you have bad volunteer groups, how that could become a reflection on your organization and the community year round?
Yeah, I know it's something ASP is very aware of, especially they have large groups, 70 or 80 people, and they like to go out into the community at night, go get ice cream or go to the grocery store, and with that kind of mob of people, it can overwhelm places. So they do try to offer some rules and guidelines for that to help prevent those things from happening in the beginning. And I think when situations arise that do affect local businesses, they try to, the discipline measures aren't just leaving leaving the service project, but it would involve an apology or a letter or a personal appearance in front of, whoever was affected by it and trying to repair it that way. I can think of a vandalism case at a state park that occurred where ASP volunteers had to, I think, replace a staircase or something like that because they had written all over it. But then they also had to go talk to the park rangers and, apologize for that and explain that this shouldn't be a reflection on the organization, that it was their individual decision, it was a poor decision, it wouldn't happen again, that kind of thing. But yeah, it's tough when you have a lot of people who are wearing your logo on their t-shirts, or just, people know that that's who they're with and they're representing your organization, whether or not they're maybe qualified to do that. So, yeah. Well, I hate to end on a tough note about difficult volunteers, so I want to bring it back around to the positive side. Veronica, we spent the first part talking about supporting, encouraging volunteers, appreciating them. So I was wondering if maybe you could share a little bit with us about what Sierra Service Project does to appreciate your volunteers.
Yeah, it's a great question. That's something that we're sort of in the process of improving this year and in future years. We have office volunteers as well as summer volunteers. And so something we've done is, for our office people who are obviously local and come on a more consistent basis, is we began a photo wall for them and held a luncheon for them to just show our appreciation and say thanks. At our annual parties in October for all of our volunteers and supporters, we had little badges for people so they could write how they were involved with the organization. Like a yellow one was, I served as a counselor during the summer, and a purple one is, I served on the board, or et cetera. So that was a great conversation starter to get people connected and celebrating their time with us and with each other. And something we're trying to move towards is appreciating returners and first-timers during the summer, so that it's not just they're thrown in and say, oh, hi, I'm new, I don't know what's going on. So giving people something during the summer that can they can show is like, yes, I've been here before, or this is my first time and I'm really excited. We haven't quite gotten there yet, but as far as logistics, but that's something that we're hoping to implement.
Great. Sounds good.
Mhm.
Did anybody else have a question they wanted to ask that we haven't talked about yet, or have a story of success or encouragement that you want to leave everybody with? Well, hearing none, I just want to thank you all again for joining me for this hour. I hope you got a couple of things, new ideas jotted down. And I have a really short survey. It's, I think, 3 questions long. And I'm going to send you guys a link to that right now in the chat box. If you don't mind filling that out, that'll help us make changes for next month and future webinars. Let's see here. I'll also send it out in a link in an email if you don't have time to do it now. And this has been recorded too, so for those of you who joined late, I'll send an email out with a link to the recording. And so if you want to watch the beginning part that you missed, you're welcome to do that too. So thank you again for joining me. I had fun talking with all of you and seeing new faces. I'm a one-woman show here, so it's often lonely in the office, and I enjoy getting to chat with other people and seeing you all too. So thanks a lot. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.